Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm going to be taking a break from seed sowing this week because I wanted to show you another way that you can produce plants that will produce flowers next summer. Now, anytime up until sort of mid-September really in this part of the world is the perfect time to take semi-ripe cuttings. So semi-ripe cuttings are plant material that you take from a plant that's either perennial or shrubby. These are different to hardwood cuttings that we take in winter time because the cutting material that you'll be taking at this time of year from the plant won't have overwintered, so it won't be woody, and they're the hardwood cuttings that you do in the winter. This will be produced from this year's plant growth, so they will be semi-ripe cuttings. So we take these cuttings at this time of year because it's still warm enough and the plants are actively still growing. So the hormones will still be working for growth stimulation within the plant material itself. And the plant will just produce roots rather than top growth. And that's what we want when we're taking cutting material, because the cuttings that we take obviously won't have roots and we need the plant to produce roots. So it's best to take them whilst the plant still is saying, oh, I need to grow. And instead of putting out leaves, it will put out roots. So in previous years, I've taken cuttings from lots of the different deciduous shrubs that have been grown, and that has produced successful results with this same method that I'm going to show you today. And in this video, I'm going to focus on 3 tender plants that I grow for producing cut flower stems and foliage. So we're going to be looking at taking cuttings from our pelargonium foliage, or some people may call it scented geranium foliage. We're going to be taking cuttings from lavender, and we're going to be taking cuttings from my chocolate cosmos plants. And I'm taking cuttings from all these 3 varieties because these are 3 varieties that in various ways struggle in my soil and climate conditions. So these 2, chocolate cosmos and this attar of roses pelargonium here, are tender perennial plants, meaning that they're perennial, so they definitely come back year in, year out, but they're tender to the frost. And the climate here in North Yorkshire, certainly up on this hillside, is just too harsh for me to overwinter them outside. So I have got some plants out in the field, but I also grow these varieties in pots as well, and I use these for my propagation material. The same goes for lavender, and that isn't due to temperature, that is due to my soil conditions during winter time. Because I'm on heavy, cold, wet clay, I've tried growing a lavender hedge because I really wanted a lavender hedge, but it's just not happening here for me. So now I grow lavender in pots. You'll notice these 3 plants, and this is just by chance, are all actually scented. So we've got chocolate cosmos that smells like chocolate, lavender which smells like lavender, and scented geranium. And I always think scented geraniums smell like lemons. And I really enjoy these 3 plants, so I'm going to take some cuttings to make sure that I've got extra plants for next year and a backup in case something goes wrong over winter with these guys here. So when I take cuttings, the mechanics that they're put into are always the same. So if you've watched my chrysanthemum cutting video from early in spring, you will have already seen my pot inside a pot method. If you haven't seen that video, then prepare to be amazed as I reveal the pot inside a pot method of taking cuttings. And it's really simple. Here I have got a 2-litre square pot and a 9cm square pot. You can see the difference in size there. And what I'm going to do is put some compost in this 2-litre pot to the level that then the 9cm pot sits into the surface, and then I fill around the outside with extra compost. So I should say at this point I'm just using my multi-purpose compost here because it's really light and fluffy. What you don't need for cuttings is anything too rich, so don't be using compost that's got a lot of added fertiliser in it. So don't be tempted to add extra fertiliser to the compost, or if you've got seed and cutting mix, then you can use that as well, but it's really not essential. I have success just using multi-purpose compost. And there you have it, a pot inside a pot. So I've filled the top with the compost there, and the 9cm pot in the middle is left empty. Now, why have I done that? That's because when you take cuttings, they actually root better along the edges of pots, and it's really handy for when you want to take the middle out the pot and check on your cuttings, because you can see if they've rooted down the side of the pot. So I'm just going to do 2 more pots like this so that I'm ready to take cuttings from all of these plants here, because if I'm prepared, then the cuttings that we take aren't going to dry out, because we're not going to give them time to do that, because the one thing we don't need is for the cutting material to get dry or limp. So always make sure you've got enough pots prepped, yes, just checking I said that correctly, before you start to take the cuttings, because what we don't want is the cutting material to start drying out. So prep everything first. So one thing you're going to notice about all of these plants that we're going to take cuttings from, none of them have got flowers on, and that's really important, because we don't want to be taking cuttings from stems where it's already putting a whole load of energy into producing a flower. So never take a cutting off a stem that's got a flower on it. Always try and take cuttings from new stems that haven't got flowers on them. Now this lavender got cut back a few weeks ago, and it's already now, because it's not producing flowers, started to produce fresh growth. So if you've got a lavender, now is a brilliant time to cut it back, because all of this foliage has got time to harden off before winter comes, and it also makes perfect cutting material. So we'll start off with our lavender, and I'll show you in close-up how I'm going to take the cutting and what it'll look like and why I'm taking it from that point. So here on the lavender you can see that was its flower stem, and this is the growth that it's put out after I've cut off its flower stem. So you'll see that it's still definitely wanting to grow. What we're looking for is really nice healthy stems like that. So you'll see that it's a little bit woody at the base, but we're not cutting into anything too old and gnarled. That wood at the base there has still got fresh growth coming out of it. So we're not cutting into old wood, we're cutting into new wood. So you can see there by the size of my snips, that's the sort of size you want to be looking for, about 10 centimetres of growth. And then you cut just below a leaf node. So it's the opposite to when we prune, because when we prune roses and other shrubs, we go just above a leaf node, and that's to promote growth from this point. But we need to go just below a leaf node. It's because what we want is to clean off the base of this stem, and it's out at these points that the stem then is gonna think, I've got to keep growing from that point. But because it's under the compost surface, it'll produce roots instead of shoots out the side. Gives it 3 points to produce roots from. Then what I'm also going to do is just take out that middle growing point, just so it's not putting too much stress on the plant, so that there is how I would take a lavender cutting. And then importantly, when you place your cutting in, always make a hole, either with a dibber, a knife or a pencil, it doesn't really matter, but don't force that stem into the compost. Create a little hole for it to sit in. I've tucked it right in up to that first leaf joint there. So there we go, I've got 8 cuttings there around the edge of that pot. So now we've dealt with the lavender plant, we'll take a look at this pot of chocolate cosmos. because even though it looks quite different to lavender, it takes cuttings in a very similar way. So what we're looking for is a stem at around about the same length as the cutting that we took from the lavender, so around about 10 to 15 centimetres. So that there is looking like a good, strong, healthy stem. What I'm going to do is just taking a cutting underneath that leaf joint there. Chocolate cosmos comes into its own at the end of summer, and it's a very, very vigorous grower at this time of year. So these cuttings should romp away, but first we just need to prep up the stem by, in a similar way to the lavender, just removing the leaf growth from a couple. And it's at these 2 points here where that cutting will start to try and produce roots. Make it a hole to slot into and then bury it up to the neck of the leaf joint. Because it's so vigorous at this time of year, this foliage at the top is just too sappy to take as a cutting. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove that top section there. It's just sometimes a case of feeling. If it feels too sappy and too young, it just won't strike as a cutting, and you just want something with a little bit more rigidity at the base. Chocolate cosmos also produces a dahlia-like tuber to it as well, which you can dig up and overwinter, and you can divide it up like you would a dahlia tuber in spring. And then we've got our scented geranium foliage, which I grow in large pots here. It produces me loads and loads of foliage growing it this way in the polytunnel. Because I actually grow these pelargoniums for the foliage rather than the flowers, although the foliage is absolutely brilliant to use in bouquets. It holds really, really well, and it just has that gorgeous lemony scent. And even if you're not panicking about cold temperatures during winter like me, and you're living a lot more of a milder winter climate, then taking cuttings like this is just a really good way of producing a lot more of the plants that you love for free. So I can tell you straight away, one stem that I'm not going to take a cutting from, and you might think this is strange, is this whopping great big stem here. Number one, because it's thicker than a pencil, so whenever you're taking your cuttings, you want to be taking it from a stem that's thinner than a pencil width. And number two, I can see at the end there, it's started to put quite a lot of energy into producing a flower bud. So I'm not going to take that as cutting material. Instead, what I'm actually going to take is this stem here, because it's a lot thinner and hasn't got a flower bud on the top of it. So that's a lot better stem to take a cutting from. When you're taking cuttings from the scented geraniums, you might find that you take a little bit of a longer cutting, and that's absolutely fine. So this one here, I would say, is around about 15 centimetres in length. There we go, all the geranium cuttings tucked in. So we've taken our cuttings, now we've got to keep them healthy and happy so that they produce roots to produce plants for next year. And how do we do that? Well, the easiest way that you're going to lose these cuttings is if you over or underwater them. They're not going to thank you if you overwater them. Just be careful that you don't kill them with kindness. They have no roots at the minute, so they have no way of drinking the water that you put into the compost. And then just to make matters even more confusing, because they have no roots, they have no way of accessing water. So they're completely reliant on us for all their needs at this stage. So we've got to make sure that the compost just stays just touch moist. You don't want it wet at all. So because I gave my compost a really good drink initially, I'm just going to give it a little sprinkle over the top so that the compost is settled around the stems of the plant. So it's not a watering regime where you can say every single day I'm going to water those plants. You just have to put your hands in the compost and test to see how moist it is. And another thing that these plant cuttings are not going to like at all is if you put them in an absolutely baking greenhouse. What these cuttings are actually going to need now is quite a warm, moist environment with sort of dappled amounts of sunlight, not baking sunlight. And so what I do is put them in a shadier part of the polytunnel, say behind that bit of wood there, where the sun doesn't belt through the polytunnel skin and burn them, because we don't want them scorched. But then I use this, which is a normal sort of see-through storage box. It has to be see-through. And then I place that on top. And it's going to keep a lot of humidity and moisture in underneath that box. And this is where the pot inside a pot method comes into its own. We can keep checking on the development of the roots without actually disturbing the roots themselves. You can lift the pot out of the middle of the bigger pot and keep checking for root development that way, and then just simply put the pot back in. And then from that point, I'll take each plant individually and pot them on into 1 litre pots. And then obviously with the cuttings that I've taken today, I will be keeping them nice and warm and sheltered over winter. So that's what I've been busy with this week. Have you guys ever taken rooted cuttings, and what has been your successes? It's really good to get points of view and hints and tips from people growing in lots of different regions. So I'll see you next week, and at the request of someone in the comments last week, next week I'm going to be making an end of August summer bouquet. So I'm going to take you around, show you what's flowering, what's the best stage to pick the flowers, and what it is that's inspiring me to make a bouquet. If you enjoyed the video and found some useful hints and tips, please like and subscribe, because it helps me continue to make content for you guys on a weekly basis. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. Bye!